UK economy. The number one concern raised by businesses and international investors is not the form of our exit from the EU. The real project fear is the agenda of the party opposite. If they had their way, whole sectors of the economy...
Order. It really is very, very unseemly. And I'm sorry to have to say that to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who's always been unfailingly courteous in his personal dealings with me and probably with everybody else. I say what I say with a heavy heart and not without reflection. There is a procedure to statements of this kind, a very long established procedure, and it bothers me greatly that the Right Honourable Gentleman in the course of a statement seems to be veering into matters out with, not even tangential, but unrelated to the spending round upon which he is focused. And I know that I say what I do with the vigorous concurrence of people who've been in this House a great deal longer than he has or than I have. And so I must ask the Chancellor, who I'm sure is fleet of foot, so to adjust his remarks from his prepared text that he focuses on that upon which he should focus and not upon that which is immaterial to the statement. And I'm setting out the position, and no one, be he ever so high, is going to tell me what the procedures in the chamber of the House of Commons are. The Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you'll recall that when I first took my seat as a Member of Parliament of Bromsgrove, the economy was in a very different position, and since then we've had to work hard to restore the nation's finances. And it is precisely because we have restored the nation's finances that we can have the spending commitments that I'm about to make today. And I have to, Mr. Speaker, if I may, set out the context of what the situation was then and how we've got out of that, so that we can focus on how we can generate the spending power that we are able to deploy today. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that back then our budget deficit was 10% of GDP. We borrowed $150 billion in Labour's last year in office. It was the highest deficit in our peacetime history. We were borrowing £1 in every £4 that was spent. The party opposite lost control of the nation's finances, as they always do, and it fell to Conservatives to pick up the mess. Now, Mr. Speaker, my two immediate predecessors took the difficult decisions that we need to bring the deficit under control that allows us to have the spending that I'm setting out today. They didn't do that for ideological reasons, but because running an enormous deficit meant that our debt was rising at an unsustainable rate, making our economy vulnerable to shocks and passing on a huge burden to the next generation. The deficit now, Mr. Speaker, is 1.1% of GDP. For the first time in a generation, public sector debt is falling sustainably as a share of our national income. And we've boosted our credibility around the world and built confidence in the UK economy again. Labour left behind a bankrupt Britain, and we fixed it. Now, thanks to those difficult decisions and the hard work of the British people, we can now afford to turn the page on austerity and move forward from a decade of recovery to a decade of renewal. Mr. Speaker, our careful management of the public finances means we can now afford to spend more on vital public services. So today, I'm deciding to set the real increase in day-to-day spending next year at £13.8 billion, delivering on the people's priorities across the NHS, education and police, and giving certainty to all departments about their budgets for the next year, clearing the decks for a government that is delivering Brexit. And I've always believed in the importance of living within our means. And unlike the party opposite, I won't squander the hard work of the last 9 years. So even with the extra spending, we are still meeting the current fiscal rules. But while our biggest challenge a decade ago was getting the deficit down, our biggest challenge today is getting our long-term economic growth back to where it was before Labour's Great Recession. If we can do that, Mr. Speaker, we can make sure there can be future spending increases that can also be sustainable. Boosting wages and raising living standards which have stagnated for too long, levelling up across the regions and nations. And we need to improve our productivity, the amount that's produced every hour worked. That isn't just a technical term. Slower productivity means lower wages and uneven growth across the country. If productivity had continued to grow at its pre-crisis levels, then average annual wages would be £5,000 higher. That pressure on people's pay packets speaks to a wider sense of disillusion and unfairness, especially in so many towns and cities outside London and the South East. Even as the economy has grown, the people have worked hard, and not everyone feels that they've benefited. There's a real sense of anxiety that's emerged over the years, a sense of politicians aren't listening and that the system isn't working, that the free market model isn't living up to its promise. We're seeing divisions emerge throughout society between regions and communities, rich and poor, rural and urban, young and old. And addressing those concerns will be a serious effort, and that's what will be shown in these spending plans today. So we will develop a new economic plan for the years ahead, a plan that moves beyond the last decade of economic recovery and looks forward to a decade of renewal, a plan that invests more in the future growth of this country. So, Mr. Speaker, we can afford to invest more because our economy is growing and our public finances are strong. And we are also deciding on our fiscal approach at a time when the cost of government borrowing is at record lows. Interest rates have been low for many years.